The Art of Being Ruled. Wyndham Lewis. Original publication 1926. 1989 edition. Narrated by Skeptical Waves. Part 11. Proudhon and Rousseau. Chapter 11. Rousseau's theory of the abdication of liberty. So in a general sense the full-blown zeal of Proudhon can be accounted for. His prudential, Roman mind scented something like the airy tread of its traditional enemy. But the details of Rousseau's political theory, with their affinities to other centralizing doctrines, were also particularly shocking to him. The simultaneous abdication of liberty, in obedience to one purely political abstract authority which Rousseau advocated, was the identical contrary of his own plan. The aphoristic table given above might have been drawn up by somebody merely by contradicting all Proudhon's most cherished theories. For Proudhon the individual hardly exists. As Dr. Este says, revolutionary syndicalism, Proudhon's anarchism was one of groups, not of individuals. Proudhon never thought of the individual at all. All his work is a panegyric of association. Spontaneous dispersed exercise of power was of the essence of his teaching, in place of the dead docility of Rousseau's system, but the spontaneity was the sociable spontaneity of groups. For him the individual had no rights whatever. As this associational instinct or organizing instinct is the first essential of political success of any sort, it was as a politician, really, that he was always thinking. And all essentially political thought is non-individualistic. Rousseau, on the other hand, who for him never touches anything but political considerations, disposed of politics once and for all by handing them over to a central, professedly political, power. Proudhon wished to retain politics in everything, down to the smallest domestic detail they must enter into everything. Man is a political animal for him more than for anybody. His relations with his baker and bootmaker would be political. When Proudhon says economic he again means politics. For politics would be diffused everywhere, and would equally share the marriage bed with the man and wife, and direct the game of bowls in the inn garden. To say that man is a political animal is to envisage him as an integrant of a group, to consider him as a being the realest thing about whom is his group. He lives entirely through, in, and with others. The individual, for such a person, is an insurgent, a breaker-up of homes, an indelicate interloper, a walking lie, a disturbing absurdity. If there were such things, such monsters, as individuals, then of course a central specialized political authority to look after them all would certainly be necessary, Proudhon might have said. But as there are no such things as individuals in reality, but only groups, they can look after themselves very well without the assistance of outside authority. They are their own politicians. The individualism of Rousseau relegated the political part of the animal, man, to a political machine, in order to free him for personal satisfactions. From his point of view it would be a far worse slavery to belong to an active political organism, involved in all the legalities and endless civic activities of its life, never for a moment to be abstract, to abstract your personality from the machine, that is to say than to be despotically governed by some one power, in whose hands every one agrees to leave the outward political direction of their existence. He would have said that if you were going to run yourself, politically, you would never have time for anything else. Politics, the duties of a highly responsible citizen, if he takes them seriously, occupy all his time and energy. His attitude would have been more like that of the people of India, who have seen so many conquerors establish themselves in overlordship of their soil, and who have indifferently accepted them, always hoping for the best. It is to that, at least, that his attitude would lead. The mysticism of Rousseau was un-European, or not characteristic of Western thought. For that reason, it implied a disbelief in the efficiency of the Roman standards of material power and of universal political initiative. What is the use of pretending that you are free and self-governing peoples, it would contend, when a little reflection would tell you that you can never be that. The real executive must always elude you. There will always be some cleverer or better placed fellow than yourself who will slip in between yourself and the working out of your enactments. Why not, at almost any price, hand over all that barren executive function to someone with a taste for it? But he had also an active antisocial propaganda, and that was the supreme offense. Man in society, civilized man, became more and more corrupt and disgusting. A man by himself might be a charming fellow, put him with half a dozen other people, and all his disagreeable qualities punctually transpire, his vanity, falsity, ill nature, and so forth. By himself he is a gentle, reflective, industrious, engaging creature. As one of a crowd he becomes a soulless monster, as though some mystery of scale, or some trick of duplication, then got to work on him. This is, however, the reverse of misanthropy. All the intense emotions are experienced by us as individuals, and experienced for individuals. You can hardly say that you love the golf club or slate club, meaning the entire body of its members, or any associational unit, in the way that you may love a person. To wish to get down to the individual and encourage personality, to attempt to persuade the individual against losing himself in the social round, when the world will be too much with him, does not suggest hatred of man, but the reverse. All it can be said truly to imply is a dislike, either with or without foundation, for groups or crowds of people, and the impoverishment of the personal life. Such a doctrine is, however, admittedly anarchic. Associational or group life does not furnish the intensest life, but it arbitrarily mobilizes certain faculties of each of the members of the group, those they possess in common, and enables them to employ this massed, organized, facultative personality effectively. Politically, the group is stronger than the individual. In every other way, the individual is stronger than the group, but usually in ways that do not count on the prudential plane. Direct government is for gods, not men, is not flattering, perhaps. But where would the flatterer lead men to, in making them believe they were gods? Or the liberal charlatan, in making them believe that they were free? Usually to worse despotisms than any concealed by the social contract of Rousseau. Where the syndicalists, or Proudhonists, desire, in Dr. Este's words, to impose upon society a system of federalism, wherein autonomy is respected, and voluntary agreements take the place of the compulsion of the law, it is a strange sort of freedom, is it not, on the face of it? Take the words, only, in which we find Dr. Este describing their aim, not chosen with any especial care, I expect, but more valuable, perhaps, for that reason. The syndicalists desire to impose, he says, upon society, voluntary agreements. What sort of voluntary agreements can these be that are thus imposed? Would even the compulsion of the law be less absolute, I wonder, or in many cases onerous, than this voluntary form of law thus imposed? The association of men must be achieved by purely voluntary bonds, free from every element of compulsion. But is the gendarme's or the policeman's the worst and most despotic compulsion? Is not the persecution, ostracism, and all the social machinery of society, free association, of which any country village supplies an excellent scantling, far worse, far crueler, and more unreasoning? Is it not just the personal touch that makes the difference? Is not the impersonality of the machinery of the law better than that? Rousseau was perhaps more man's friend, after all, with his abstract political machinery, than Proudhon with his personal machinery of public opinion of the small federalist town, governed by a bureau du travail, and regulated by functionaries who were at the same time friends and neighbors, with all the license of familiarity, and backed by all the power of public opinion. Unless it were to be regarded as extremely misanthropic to say that all friends are not necessarily friends indeed, and that all men are not seen at their best in the capacity of friends and neighbors, then it certainly looks as though there were something to be said for Rousseau's side of the question. He is not that mechanical, shallow, emphatic optimism about human nature, of the more associational type of man. But he is not, for that reason, such a treacherous villain as Proudhon would have him. Because people do not value the products of the prudential mind, and are not in love with duty, the eloquent, irresponsible teaching of an intellectual anarchist like Rousseau will always appeal to them more. On the other hand, in practice, intense pleasures, and the ardor of personal highly conscious life, are not their affair either. The more relaxed, lazier, less intense group or team pleasures that Proudhon's system would encourage would, in practice, please them better. Every man's ego or personality is his wicked double, as it were. He likes reading about him, but would not really enjoy living with him. With him life would be too exciting. Rousseau's picture was exciting, colored, and romantic, hence its success. But when the dream comes true, it is another matter. The syndicalist ideal could be illustrated very well in a curious unit found among the maritime Chukchi. It is called a boatful, Otwat Yiram, and consists of 8 oarsmen and 1 helmsman. The latter, called boatmaster, Otwermechin, owns, and used to build, the boat. The crew is composed of his nearest relatives. This little watertight, compact group unit, working as one man, must provide for its members many of the elements of ordinary happiness. It is easier to be 9 men than 1. All the politics of their life would be in that boat. But one of the difficulties of syndicalism is that, short of imagining sweeping and radical changes in the distribution of the population, and a deliberate return to simpler conditions, it is not easy to find anything satisfying the group instinct, and placing it in a position where it can really exercise any political power in any likely modern world. A good deal even of syndicalist theory refers to things as remote from reality as the Chukchi boatful, or the minds of the Galilean fishermen. So we have caught a glimpse of Proudhon momentarily in the riddle of the homicidal puppet in Petrushka, ferociously pointing to the Pantheon, and making the unbecoming suggestion we have read. Like the hussar in the ballet, or the one who pursued the young Rousseau with drawn saber, like, in short, the eternal policeman of the world, the great French philosopher of federalism, has appeared for a moment. And to conclude, it is probably Proudhon who is the despot where these two are concerned, rather than the virtuous and sensitive Jean-Jacques. It was no doubt against the Proudhons of this world, more or less, that Jean-Jacques was anxious to come to some arrangement with his less arbitrary fellows, against whom he may have felt that a little governmental protection would not be a bad thing. At least it would ensure him against disturbance in the vaults of the Pantheon.